Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament. We are looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus, and we're doing them in chronological order, studying through the Gospels. And today we're looking at Jesus promising rest for the soul, and this comes from Matthew 11, verses 20 through 30. And so in verse 20, he starts to denounce the towns where um, he had been doing so many miracles because they wouldn't repent, right, and of their sins, and they wouldn't turn to God. And so he starts out and says, what sorrow awaits you, and he starts listing several towns here that he goes through. And he starts talking about all these towns that will be better off, that certain towns like Tyre and Sidon would be better off on judgment day than you. And he says the same thing about Capernaum. He says, the people of Capernaum, he says, you'll go down to the place of dead. He says, for if the miracles I had done, or the miracles I did for you had been done in wicked Sodom, I'm talking about Sodom and Gomorrah from the Old Testament, if they'd been there, I tell you, even Sodom would be better off than on Judgment Day than you. And so he's really denouncing them and going after them. And so Tyre, Sidon, and Sodom were all ancient cities with a long-standing reputation for wickedness. And I put in the notes here for those. And all of them were destroyed by God because of its evil, right? The people of Bethesda, Chorazin, and Capernaum, they saw Jesus firsthand. And, all these towns that he listed, they saw him, but they refused to repent. They absolutely refused to repent. They refused to believe in Jesus. And so Jesus said, if those wicked cities had seen him, they would have repented. That they would have repented. And so, Jesus saw and didn't believe that he was suffering even greater punishment than what he had seen. And so it's just he really goes after these things. And so then after that he goes into verse 25 and says, at the time Jesus then offered a prayer. He offered a prayer and said, "O Father in heaven and earth, thank you for hiding these things from those who think themselves wise and clever, and for revealing them to the childlike." And there's some interesting things about that. And then he finishes up and says, "Yes, Father, it pleases you to do it in this way." And there's so much truth to that, right? He mentions two kinds of people here in his prayer. So there's the wise and the clever, arrogant in their knowledge, right? Their own knowledge, and the childlike who humbly open to receive the truth of God's words. And it's interesting how that seems to work out, right? A lot of times, those who are arrogant or think they're wise or think they're smart in their own way, refuse Jesus. But oftentimes, those who are childlike or those who are willing to be humble and humble themselves are more open to accepting God. And we see that when we see that in the Pharisees were some of the ones he was talking about here, and he was talking a lot about the people in the cities that he had done these miracles and stuff in front of, and they were still refused to accept him. And then finally, he finishes it off, right, with verse 27 through 30. And in verse 27, my Father has entrusted everything to me. No one truly knows the Son except the Father, and no one truly knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. And so it's interesting. It says in the Old Testament, to know someone meant more than just the head knowledge, right? We talk about to know someone biblically, joking around about the Old Testament, but to know someone meant, it's like not like, oh, I know this person, but it's like I know them. It suggested an intimate relationship, and that's what Jesus is talking about here. And then we get into verse 28, 29, and 30, right? And Jesus says a kind of a interesting thing. And a lot of times, what the things that Jesus teaches is it kind of flips the idea of, especially of the world, on its head. And he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burden. I carry heavy burdens. Some translations say heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And it's like, oh, that's nice, right? Oh, I definitely want to come and get some rest. And then he says this: "Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." And so you think about that, and it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, for those who don't know, a yoke is, if you've ever seen two cattle or two oxen, usually it's like oxen or some type of larger breed of animal, and they would put a yoke on them, right? And the yoke tied them together. It was for doing work. A yoke, if you someone had or I'm sorry, if cattle had yokes, or if you were getting a yoke, that means you were going to be doing work. And so it's interesting that Jesus is like, hey, those who are weary and carry lots of burdens, come to me and I'll put you to work, right? And I'll give you rest. Like I'll put you to work. And what he's saying here is, and he says it, his load is easy, right? And his burden is light. And so it may not make sense to us, you know, that the rest, right, that Jesus promises love, healing, and peace with God, not the end of all your labor. And that's the thing, is like, we talk about this, and I've talked about this in the last couple messages. Becoming a Christian is easy, right? Christianity is simple. And this is simple, right? There's things like love and grace and mercy, and coming to Jesus is easy, and it will lighten your load, right? But being a Christian isn't always easy. But here's the thing, it's a lot easier than living in the world, in the end, especially, right? And what he's saying here is, even though as you become a Christian, yeah, you're still going to have to work. You have to work, right? The general rule is you have to work, right? Which one's going to be easier? Working under Jesus or working outside of Jesus? And and again, like we've always said, we don't do a prosperity theology type thing where, as long as you come and you come to God and you give, and you have enough faith and you give him enough money or whatever, then you're going to be blessed and all these things are going. No, that's not. Jesus doesn't even talk about that. Jesus is like, look, this is going to be hard. He talks about how it's going to be hard, but in the end, coming to him is going to be peaceful. And there's a lot of things that he takes off of us and does. And so that's what we need to be looking at with him. So it's interesting how he starts this off with condemnation to the towns that he had been in that wouldn't really accept and receive him. He kind of throws almost a curse on them, and then says, well, Sodom would have been better off, right? And it's like, or you'll be better off than Sodom was. And we know what happened to Sodom. He destroyed it, like leveled it to the ground with fire and brimstone. And so, and then he goes into to a prayer of being thankful, for those who do, for those who have accepted him, and for then he's kind of got a special prayer in there about, especially showing God to those who are more childlike, right, and not the ones who think they're clever. And he says there too that the Son chooses to, he thanks him again for the people that he does choose to allow to, or choose to show him to and reveal to him, and give to him. And then, he calls all those people and says, hey, look, come on, you're going to have to work, but it's easier. It's a lot easier, and you're a lot better off in the end. And so that's the message that he's given in that. And I hope we take that to heart and understand that, becoming a Christian is not always going to be easy, but it's easier in the end. And that's what he's saying. That's what he's talking about there. And especially the rest, the last line I put in there, the rest that Jesus promises: love, healing, and peace with God. Right? That's a big one. Peace with God. That in the end you're good. And so those are the things that he talks about here. Again, appreciate everyone who sticks around and watches these. I really do appreciate it. If you think it'd be beneficial for someone, please share it with them. There's a lot of ways you can do that with the share button and different things like that. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do that, because we're going to continue to try to put out these type of things and go deeper into some of our studies. And as always, I appreciate you for watching.